right. Welcome, folks.
Great.
All right. I think, do we have everybody who's joining us on at this point?
Go ahead, Steve.
All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you join us for today's PDX business series presented by the Middleman Jewish Community Center. I'm Steve Albert, the Executive Director of the MJCC, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you. We're excited at the MJCC that we're going to be able to reopen a number of programs and services in the next week or so. We've been open since mid-June with fitness programs and in-person personal training along with our virtual offerings. But in the next week or so, we'll be able to reopen our swimming pools, restart our soccer leagues, reopen our racquetball courts. And we're really looking forward to welcoming people back to the J for all of those activities. So read our emails, check our website, and we'll be providing detailed information about the reopening very, very soon. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to the MJCC Board President, Jason Zidell.
And thank you for joining us at today's PDX Business Series event. My name is Jason Zidell, and I'm the president of the MJCC Board of Directors and also a member. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy under our smoky skies. Today, we'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on Portland's real estate market. COVID has also had an impact on the operations of the J, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Your support at events like this help us continue to offer programming in these challenging times. I'd like to thank our sponsors, presenting sponsor Portland State University, series sponsors Richard Barker, Wealth Management Advisor of Merrill Lynch, Barry and Carla Benson, First Republic Bank, Gewurz Menashe, Jonathan Singer of Barg Singer PC, the Jerry and Helen Stern Grandchildren's Fund of OJCF, and Turner Construction. Our moderator today is Jonathan Singer. Jonathan is a real estate and business attorney who delivers big firm experience in a boutique setting. Jonathan regularly counsels developers, investors, property owners, purchasers, small business owners, lenders, borrowers, landlords, and tenants on a wide range of complex real estate transactions and disputes. Jonathan also assists clients in the negotiation of various forms of agreements, including easements, licenses, listing agreements, operating agreements, option agreements, and liability waivers. Before joining Barg Singer, he practiced law in the Washington, D.C. office of O'Melveny, a global law firm, and in the Portland office of Miller, Nash, Graham & Dunn. Prior to beginning his legal career, Jonathan was a political consultant and writer, in which capacity he interviewed high-profile political figures ranging from Barack Obama to Bob Dole. Jonathan is a fifth-generation Portlander who grew up at the MJCC and who graduated in the first class of PJA 8th graders, where he remains active in civic and community affairs. Jonathan?
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is really exciting as someone who has been involved in the business series, who's on the board of the JCC, and is active in the Portland real estate world. I'm just thrilled to have this great panel on COVID in the Portland real estate world, Portland real estate community, and its impacts. You know, this year has been a difficult year. We've had COVID. We have had the election going on. We have had all of the tumult relating to racial relations and protests in the city. I mean, right now we have all the smoke out there, and I think the best news that we all have is that, at least in the Jewish world, the year ends tomorrow. So we have a good year, and we have good things to look forward to. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce this all-star panel, starting with Evan Bernstein. Evan is Director of Leasing and Acquisitions and partner at Pacific Northwest Properties, a family-owned and operated Beaverton real estate firm that owns and manages over 3.6 million square feet of business parks, industrial buildings, and suburban office assets in the Portland metro area. Evan is a graduate of the University of Washington. You're going to get a Pac-12 theme here today. And before he joined PNWP, where he oversees all leasing, project acquisitions, and marketing of the company, he was an industrial broker who won several industry awards. And before and during that time he was a broker, he was one of the top radio hosts in the industry, including in Portland. We actually could probably spend the entire panel talking about the Cabana Boy days, but we are going to pass on that. He was also honored in 2017 as one of Portland Business Journal's 40 Under 40, so we'll welcome Evan Bernstein here. We're also going to welcome Eddie LaBerge. Eddie is Manager of Business Development for Turner Construction, a multi-billion-dollar US-based construction company. Eddie joined Turner in 2005, fresh out of Oregon State University, and Portland's own, soon-to-be renamed Wilson High School, which is also the alma mater of your moderator today. Don't know what they're going to rename it, but we will find out, Eddie, very soon. Eddie is very active in the Portland real estate industry, serving as president-elect of the Oregon chapter of NAIOP, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, and has been involved at Turner in projects ranging from the expansion of Providence Park, which I don't know how they did that in a short period of time, got more seats in there while they were playing soccer on the field. I mean, amazing. To the new 25-story 11W building that's under development on a former Goodman family parking lot. So we'll welcome Eddie here today as well. And last but not least, Ashley Ray. Ashley is a retail broker at Barnard Commercial, which is a family-oriented boutique commercial real estate brokerage in Portland. Ashley also graduated from Oregon State University and grew up in the commercial real estate world. In 2008, she decided to follow her lifelong passion and joined Barnard Commercial. Over the years, she has been integral in evolving Barnard Commercial with new technology and has completed many lease and sale transactions for national companies, family operations, and local startups ranging from State Farm Insurance to Snap Fitness. She's also a very talented artist. You can see, I'm guessing maybe the painting behind her is one of hers, but even if not, she's got great art. You can find it online. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to welcome all the three of you. I'm sure that we're hearing the applause, we're feeling the applause, even though we don't get to have it in this setting. But maybe we can start in that order. Evan, can you tell us a little bit about what you do during the day, just by your time? No, but what keeps you busy over at Pacific Northwest Properties?
I don't do much. I pick up dry clean for Tom Stern and Brad Stern. That's what I do. But appreciate the introduction, and thanks to MJCC for having us. It's an honor. Shana Tova to all my Yiddish brethren and family and friends watching this as well. So our company, as you mentioned, Jonathan, we don't really think of ourselves as being in the real estate business, more in the people business. So our vision statement says buildings don't have dreams, people do. And that's really how we operate. It's people first, employees, our tenants, our service providers, our broker partners, and then other people who we interface with every single day. We've grown kind of quietly to be a large industrial business park and suburban office developer, investor, and then property manager. So believe it or not, we're up to about 500 wonderful tenants in our portfolio. Actually, it's about 495 wonderful fiver jerks, but it's a wonderful portfolio of people, diverse tenant mix. We've got manufacturing companies, distribution companies, high tech, recreational, and everything in between. I talked to 3 tenants this past week that were kind of interesting. I thought I'd share. One manufactures parts that were in the SpaceX rocket that recently went up to space and came back. So they're doing that right down there in Wilsonville. We have a company who does parkour, a parkour gym. And so if you want to train to be the next America's next ninja warrior, you go to Tualatin and train there. And you know, lastly, believe it or not, you know, there's so many cool uses inside of our projects. The little strip of adhesive glue that puts together a cereal box at the top. One of our tenants makes that glue in Hillsborough. So just dynamic mix and diverse tenants, awesome tenants, local companies, mom and pops, regional, national, and some international companies as well.
That's great. Well, thanks for joining us. Eddie, what do you do day in, day out over at Turner when you're not physically putting the roof on the new soccer stadium?
Yeah, I lifted that up there by myself, Jonathan. No, that's a massive team of people that put that thing together. I also want to echo Evan's sentiments there, just in appreciation of the JCC having us be a part of this. I was really excited when Jonathan reached out because JCC's got a part in my heart. It's a story of Southwest Vermont Street, if you know it. I'm a kid that grew up on Southwest 63rd in Vermont. I'm Catholic, so I'm not Jewish. I went to St. John Fisher, which is at 45th in Vermont. And then I popped up to Wilson High School, which is about 12th in Vermont or so. Went to school with Jonathan there. And in between that middle school and high school time frame, my parents needed a place for my little brother and I to get out some of that energy, and got us a membership at the JCC. And so I have just extremely fond memories of that place, that community as a child growing up. And it gave me great pleasure to get invited to come back to this. And it was actually just a couple of years ago through Charlene and Jay Zidell that we got involved on a corporate level, which is really exciting. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me. I'll be as brief as I can with Turner. You know, after doing high school with Jonathan, I went down to Oregon State, studied engineering, came up here back in 2005, and have been working for Turner ever since. So I'm 15 years here. My current role is the manager of business development, which means my job is to help us identify projects that, you know, where we can provide value to our clients, and then kind of create strategies around how to make sure that those projects get launched successfully. So that's kind of my role in a nutshell. A little bit about Turner. I mean, Turner is a fascinating company. We were started in New York City in 1902. We're the largest general builder in the United States. We do about $15 billion a year. That work is conducted across 46 offices that employ about 10,000 professional people like myself. And Portland is one of those offices. The Portland office opened in 1979, so we've been here a little over 40 years. And during that time, we've built some just incredible projects, you know, stuff like the Moda Center. We had involvement in the Oregon Convention Center. As Jonathan brought up, we've renovated what used to be Civic Stadium 3 times, once for minor league baseball and twice for MLS. We've recently completed some great jobs downtown. We just finished Northwest Natural's new headquarters building. We did a renovation of the Wells Fargo Tower. We're currently doing an expansion for Adidas up there in North Portland. We do a fair amount of work out west for groups like Genentech, Intel, Nike. So, you know, kind of a composite of work: residential, hospitality, office, data center, high-tech manufacturing, just, you know, commercial construction. So that kind of gives you an idea of who our company is and where we like to play.
That's great. Thanks, Eddie. Ashley, what does your day look like, and what type of deals are you working on the leasing side, on the sales side, all of the above?
Yeah, great question. And once again, thank you for having me here. I'm not as closely tied to the JCC as everybody else is here, but I'm honored to be invited in today. Day in, day out, our client activity varies greatly. So we're primarily a Portland suburban market-based brokerage, My father started the company in 1999, and I joined him shortly after graduating, about a year after graduating from Oregon State University in 2008. So starting in 2008 was a really interesting time to get into the industry officially. So I got some hard knocks those first couple of years, but it just kind of instilled in me the desire to make things better. So through that time, we innovated our company and decided to utilize technology and put video tours of all of our spaces so that decision makers that may be out of state, particularly for national clients and tenants, could have a closer look at each of those individual spaces and know what the environment is like. We work on anything from 5,000 square foot buildings all the way up to your 120,000+ square foot grocery anchored shopping center. Primarily in the retail industry, although some of our client relationships have taken us to office or industrial related, but there's a lot of crossover between the three components these days too. So, but again, primarily in that retail core. We represent currently about, I'd say 80 or so properties within the Portland metropolitan area. 35 of those are fully leased currently. So it's constantly changing as we lease spaces and then have tenants not renew their lease or move elsewhere to expand or downsize. There's a lot of movement constantly. So we work on anything as far as the tenant side goes, from your small 1,000, 1,500 square foot space up to your larger grocery anchored space. So a lot of variety in there. And also in that is your mom and pop local brewery to your national grocer. So it makes it exciting. That's the part that we love about it.
That's great. Well, Lenny, I'm going to ask that you put all four of us on the screen now, if that's something that is feasible. And let's get into it. I think the first thing that we have to do to look at the COVID era is to look at the immediately before COVID era. So what were you guys all seeing in the Portland real estate market and your sectors of it, because you really cover the breadth of it from construction to ownership to leasing? What were you seeing towards the end of the year and into the new year? Was there a slowdown? Was there, I mean, we'd had several years of boom. Where were things at? Maybe Ashley will go reverse order this time and start with you, Ashley.
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we were going strong. All of us were incredibly busy. And I'd say we were kind of reaching that point in the marketplace where, it's, on the leasing side at least, lease rates were so high, and triple nets have creeped up higher, which eats into a tenant's profitability. And expectations were also really high on both the tenant and the landlord side, to the point where it had gotten to be a little bit more challenging, and the time frame between start to finish of any transaction had just gotten to be longer and longer. So we were kind of sensing that there was going to be something on the horizon that would alter that a little bit. Obviously, nobody predicted it to be a global pandemic.
You didn't see COVID coming?
That's not a typical market cycle at all. So I think the one thing that we all have in common is that we're all experiencing this for the first time together. So I guess pre-COVID, we were on track to have a blowout year again. Post-COVID, I don't know if you want to get into post-COVID right now.
We'll get into that next. We'll pause there. Eddie, your work is a little bit of a lagging indicator in the sense that, you know, the projects that you're working on, it's not like me. I get a call, hey, can you help me with this lease that I'm working on? I need some legal representation. They're calling you a year out or 2 years out, and they probably have their development work years, maybe even before that. So, but where were you in terms of work immediately, I guess, under contract or under construction, as well as that sort of short-term or at least near-term pipeline?
Yeah, that's a very apt description of kind of who we are and where we play, you know, within the cycle of things of projects, Jonathan. And I meant to mention it on the intro, but I was worried I was going too long, which is that, you know, part of what I can kind of bring to this conversation is a little bit of both, which is a national perspective, because we have such a large footprint, and then also a local perspective because we're involved in so much work here locally and have been for a while. And so I'll flip back and forth kind of between the two as we're talking today. And Jonathan, if it's not clear, feel free to call me out because that question has two answers and they're different. From a national perspective, we track this stuff pretty heavily and have so for the last 100 plus years. We were starting to see a fairly significant softening Q4 of last year going into Q1 this year. Now it wasn't tremendous fall off a cliff. It was just some softening, right? It wasn't quite as hot and heavy as it had been. With that said, Portland was kind of an outlier. March, up through March, so January, February, and the first half of March were some of the busiest years from a sales perspective, from a new work perspective that I've ever seen. And I've been here for 15 years. We were responding to close to $1 billion worth of work in that 3-month span, as in those were projects that we were pursuing, trying to get selected for. So it gives you a sense.
If you can remind us, I know you've said this at NAIOP events, but Portland commercial construction market in a year might be 3 to 4 billion.
Yeah, that's a relatively good metric. You have to strip
a billion relative to a $3 to $4 billion market, just a relatively short.
Yeah, I mean, it was on fire. We got north of that $4 billion mark there for a couple of years, but just in general, you can kind of think of Portland as a, call it $3 to $4 billion market, excluding, heavy civil, construction type projects, excluding single family homes. So yeah, it was a fairly significant pace. And then, Friday the 13th in March happened and things turned off pretty good. So, and then one additional part that you were asking there about, which is our work, it could take 18 to 24, even longer to build our projects. So the projects that we had already broken ground on and were in flight, they continued to go. So that portion of our work remained extremely busy. It's really just the new sales portion that really started to slow down in March.
Evan, where was Pacific Northwest Properties as of end of the year, beginning of the year? Were you out looking for properties? Were you building? Were you full up? Your leasing? What did the market look like, and what did your look like at that time?
It's interesting. We've experienced a wonderful cycle, kind of long in the tooth, right? Where people are kind of looking over their shoulders saying, when's this thing going to end? We had, quarter after quarter of record-breaking absorption, more people taking and leasing space and moving out. You had sale prices that were increasing and values that were off the charts. You had rental rates that were higher than ever, and you had vacancy rates that were lower than ever. So it's, and this has been happening for the last, 5-6 years. So everybody's a little bit timid, right? Where it's like something's got to give. We've all been doing this long enough, and even for non-commercial real estate folks who are joining this this webinar today, there's business cycles. So we're a little bit concerned and kind of wondering when's this going to end and what's going to make it end? Could it be a election year? Could it be a geopolitical or war or, God forbid, natural disaster? We didn't think that COVID was going to hit us in the face, right away. So for our company, last year was probably one of our biggest years of growth in our 30-year history since 1990 in terms of acquisition, development. And so we were going into 2020, sort of with a natural, digestion pause. You eat a lot and then all of a sudden it's time to digest. But still kind of actively looking and not really worried about something kind of derailing the market. And it's interesting because we've got a pretty good perspective owning and operating office buildings, not downtown, albeit, which is a whole different beast. We'll probably get into that. But with our business park and warehouse and industrial projects all over Portland, despite a pause at the beginning where everybody sort of froze the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days of the pandemic. In some ways, it's almost business as usual, believe it or not, in the industrial sector, especially the bigger box warehouses and distribution pieces of our business. They really haven't seen a huge change. what's kind of interesting about industrial real estate is you're so dependent on your warehouse. You know, warehouse folks can't work remotely. You can't work from anywhere with your laptop. You're doing something in that warehouse. Forklifts can't be remote, and CNC machines can't be remote, and overhead doors and electricity and pallets and all the action inside of a warehouse, you're dependent on your facilities. So it's been a little bit more bulletproof in that respect, albeit we've had some challenges, and not all tenants and all businesses are thriving right now. A lot of people are hurting. There's going to be some business fatalities, especially as PPP funds run out and stimulus funds run out and things like that. But overall, out of the sort of the four sectors of commercial real estate, which are industrial, office, retail, and multifamily apartments, I'd probably say that, you know, industrial has been the least affected based on COVID. And it's pretty interesting, although you'll get into Ashley here in a second, who called me the other day with a beautiful headline that says, "Don't believe the headlines, retail is not dead." So I can't wait to hear what she says about that when it's appropriate. But, you know, for the most part, you know, it's a little bit of, you know, cautious optimism, and certainly things have changed, and everybody's sort of in a wait and see pattern. But, you know, leasing hasn't stopped, and sales haven't stopped, and there's not all of a sudden a ton of vacancy. As a matter of fact, if you look at the metrics and the statistics, it's not much different than it was 12 months ago, believe it or not, on the industrial sector of commercial real estate.
Well, that's some great insight. Let's boil down a little bit more. So COVID hits. I mean, obviously it was filtering through the rest of the world earlier, but, you know, by mid-March. And my sense, chatting with the three of you yesterday as we were preparing for this, is there really have been, in a sense, two COVIDs. There was the real initial shutdown, and although, you know, Oregon, for instance, didn't have the construction closure that Washington State did, you know, in our daily lives, folks retrenching and businesses trying to close, everyone trying to renegotiate leases, or at least a lot of folks trying to renegotiate leases. And then there's been what's happened the last few months. Now, maybe some of that's driven by some of the stimulus, maybe it's just people getting back to business. So what have you, like, what has changed for you in the last 6 months of COVID? Is it just been one straight thing, or is it, is your life today a little bit different than it was in March, let alone what it was in last year? Maybe we'll go reverse again, and Evan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, you know, it's hard to put your finger on time right now. I don't know what day of the week it is, let alone what 6 months ago looked like. But I do remember March, and I remember those. I think everybody watching probably paused at the beginning. You kind of freeze, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. You know, some people took a little bit longer to unpause, and others didn't. You know, for us, and you got to keep in mind, in our business and commercial real estate, it's not like counsel. It's not like you, Jonathan, as a commercial real estate attorney, where a client calls you up and says, "I've got a purchase and sale agreement I need you to help me with." You know, these projects have been in the planning stages, or, you know, for months or years, or under construction. And so we had a unique situation at the beginning of the pandemic, whereby we had a project under contract to purchase, and we still had the opportunity to get out of the purchase. It wasn't too late. And so we kind of vacillated and went back and forth, you know, for a couple of weeks. Should we do this? Should we not do this? What's it going to look like? And if you've ever driven on the road and seen a squirrel, you know, there's a reason why squirrels get killed on the road, because they go this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way. They can't make up their minds. So I'll be honest, I squirreled it for about 2 weeks, and then I said, enough of this nonsense. I'm going to become roadkill. Got off to the side of the road, and we said, we're going to proceed with this acquisition. We're going to be here a long time. COVID isn't forever. We try to be forward thinking, and I've seen a lot of our customers who have been forward thinking and willing to you know, take chances, willing to pivot, willing to adapt and evolve. Those are the ones who are going to survive. It's the folks who never unfroze, or are stuck in their old ways, or aren't willing to adapt to the new norm. They're going to be in trouble. But it almost feels now, mid-September 2020, albeit we've got a whole set of other challenges with the forest fires and smoke and the continued civil unrest and things like that. But as it relates to the pandemic, it almost feels like people are figuring out a way to get through it right now. A lot of companies are back working. our office opened up about 60 days ago. We worked remotely for the first few months. It was tough. It had challenges. It took a hit on our morale and took a hit on our productivity and efficiency and synergy and things like that. But since people have been back, it's been unbelievable. I would say that Pacific Northwest Properties morale is at an all-time high right now. We're getting things done. We're communicating. We're collaborating. So, and we see our tenants doing the same thing. We see our service providers doing the same thing. So I don't want to say it's like business as usual right now because there's so much uncertainty and chaos and stress, but it feels a little less chaotic here right now. Now we'll see what happens. We're crossing our fingers and hoping that we don't have a second phase or another shutdown. And, we get nervous. I saw a headline last night in the Portland Business Journal. Many of you may have seen it. I think I have it right here. It says, Portland landlords will temporarily have to pay relocation costs if they raise rents at all. Now this, I think, is more applicable to residential than commercial, but you never know what's going to hit you in the news or what law is going to be passed or what the governor may make you do the next day. So when I say it feels a little bit more normal, like we're still looking over our shoulders and preparing for what could be the worst or changes or other things. So we're just trying to be as positive as possible, be outward focused, and count our blessings. We're very lucky. We're very lucky to have a job and a roof over our head and be in a really dynamic commercial real estate industry. Portland's resilient, man. I mean, I'm telling you, our tenants and our the brokerage community and service providers and the Ashleys and the Eddies and the Jonathans of the world. We're not going to go into a corner and roll and be in the fetal position. We're going to figure out a way to navigate this thing. And so that's the only thing you can do. And that's the position we've chosen.
So that's great. Eddie and Ashley, I'll get back to you in 1 minute. I just want to boil down a quick question, Evan. So in those first months leading into before PPP and maybe once PPP was even coming, you've got about 500 tenants. You're probably getting calls from almost all of them saying, hey, we want a rent reduction. You're even maybe getting letters from, there was reports that Starbucks sent letters to every Starbucks landowner in the country saying, we're not going to pay you a full rent or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Were you getting those calls? And can you share with us sort of in relation to your portfolio, what sort of percentage you were saying it's trying to work out?
So my job every day, I'm kind of in charge of leading the offensive side of our business, leasing and acquisitions and site selection, development planning, marketing, and things like that. Well, for those first 30 days or 60 days, I became the collections department essentially. So about 20% of our tenants called us up and said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, we need help. We need some rent relief or rent deferral, or we don't want to pay rent, or we want to renegotiate our lease. And we made a commitment, Tom Stern and Brad Stern and the rest of our team, we said we're going to do everything we can to help every single one of our tenants. Now, we're not a deep-pocketed bank. We can't help everybody, but we did financially help about 20% of our customers to help sustain them, because it's truly a partnership, and it doesn't do us any good to say, hey, we don't want to hear from you, continue paying your rent if they're going to end up going out of business. So, but we couldn't help everybody. The ones who were organized and who asked us early were helped faster, much like the government with the stimulus funds. But even if we didn't offer financial help, we offered a shoulder to lean on and an ear to listen to. A lot of our tenants aren't huge companies, so they don't have big banking relationships. They don't know how to get PPP, so we help make those introductions. And we just made a commitment to listen to every single person. That was our job. I wish we could help every single person. I love to say, 20% rent forever. You get a car. I'm not Oprah, unfortunately. So we did the best we could do. And
better eyebrows.
Hey, I appreciate the fact you have eyebrows, because I work hard to make sure there's two of them. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Great. Eddie, so, construction gets shut down in Washington State, other than, I think, essential project. Portland, Oregon, there's not a shutdown, but there are efforts to try to have more distancing. What was happening with your projects? And I do see, as I mentioned on the top here, that DJC just mentioned in the last couple of days that you have a big project with the Goodmans that you just got permits on. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So what, or were you, was that time spent really trying to hold together deals, still push things forward? And where do you guys sit today in terms of what you're working on what you're currently building and what you're fighting for those new deals.
Sure. Well, a couple things. First of all, I love Evan's optimism, and I also want to echo his appreciation just about how fortunate we are to be in this market and still busy doing a lot of things. Jonathan, you bring up a really good point, which is, a place like a Washington was shut down. So gravitating back up to the national level, it was really dependent geographically in terms of what was going on. So places like Washington, we had some issues in San Francisco, New York City, of course, right? Saw massive impacts at the very front end of COVID-19 in terms of us being able to continue conducting our work. Bringing it back down to the local level in Oregon, as you mentioned, we were very fortunate, right? We were an essential business. We were able to continue conducting our work with one big caveat, which is that we had to, abide by all the different guidelines in this new coronavirus world. So, Evan was actually saying some things earlier about his tenant mix in terms of, folks that use warehouses have to be there because their stuff's there. Construction is very similar, right? So in construction, you can't pour concrete from your house if you're a superintendent, right? You've got to be on site, right? And when you think about the logistics of the way that we operate our business, it's men and women, and sometimes hundreds of them, come into a site every day. They're handling common materials. They're handling common tools. They're in confined spaces. They have similar, paths of ingress and egress in and out of the buildings. There's all these issues that are just rife with trouble when it comes to coronavirus. So, if you were to go to one of our job sites today, you would see a lot of different protocols that were designed to address that, right? So every single of those, we have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 people coming to our sites every single day. And when they come to our sites, they get a health screening on the way in, right? They get a temperature check on the way in, and they'll get a little wristband that identifies them as having been checked that day. They're required to wear masks, but there's issues with that, right? Because they're also required to wear safety goggles. Well, when you wear a mask, it fogs your safety goggles. So, how do you manage through that process, right? How do you reimagine the work to ensure that people are able to keep, 6 feet distance when they're working in these spaces and handling these materials? So there's a lot of effort that goes into the planning of that in and out of buildings. So this isn't as big of a deal when you're talking about a low profile, 1, 2, 3 story building, right? Because you can create these different access points and still be able to access all those floors. But when you have a job like the Goodman's job at 11th and Washington, we're not there yet because we're still a hole in the ground. But when you have a project that's going up, 24 stories in the air, you've got stairs, but you're not taking all 24 up there, right? And so you have these things called man hoists. So man hoist is essentially just a crude version of an elevator, right? Well, you can only put so many people in there. So when you start limiting the amount of people and the distance that they have to travel, and you times that by a few hundred people coming to your site, you're talking about a very material impact to the productivity of the project and also to the cost, right? So a lot of it is bent around, kind of weighing those different things and making sure that we're planning them out right and doing so in the most efficient way that we can for our clients to make sure that their project is still, meeting its scheduled deadlines and still, competitive from a cost standpoint, but then also making sure that our staff, our employees, our subcontractors are safe, right? Which is our primary goal on any job every time that they come to the job. So a lot of how we're reacting in the moment today, if that's the question, what did COVID-19 change? A lot of it is really centered around that piece, how we conduct our work.
Ashley, how have the last couple months changed for you relative to the beginning? I'm guessing that you were maybe helping even pro bono, in a sense, some of your clients with some of those calls that Evan was talking about, tenants trying to make it work. Are things picking up? Are you putting together deals now relative to where you were in March, April? Well, I think we may have Ashley frozen. Okay, we'll try to get Ashley back. I'm going to shoot her an email and make sure that she can get back in. Eddie, similar question to you. I think we were talking about this yesterday. in terms of the work being done now, again, you're sort of a lagging indicator, but in terms of the work being done today, do you have any data on that, whether it's locally or nationally? Is there a lot of construction that Turner's doing? I think you had a number for one of the recent summer months.
Yeah, well, so yeah, that was an interesting thing that we were talking about, Jonathan, and I kind of mentioned it on the front end, which is that once our projects start, they take, you know, a year, 2, 3 years to build many times, right? So long as we can keep them going, and that's why what we were just talking about in terms of COVID, being able to continue building was a big deal for us. As long as we're able to keep them going, we're still insanely busy. So just to give the group a perspective, in, I believe it was July, our company put in $1.7 billion worth of work nationally, which was tied for a high watermark. And when you think about that in terms of not only happening this July, but also happening amongst coronavirus, it's a really incredible number and just shows you just the pace of construction from an operations standpoint in the market right now. The caveat to that is what we're seeing in the future. And I'm sure you've got some questions, geared towards that, Jonathan, as we get down there, but, where do we go next and how much work is there to go grab? And then the question is also, of that work that there's to grab, what is it, right? What types of projects are going to get built here once we kind of get out of this coronavirus slump?
Well, I think let's get right into that, and while we try to get Ashley back on as well. But and I'll start with you, Eddie, and then we'll move to Evan. How is what you're chasing after changing, if at all, with the way the market is? I'm downtown right now. I'm looking out, at smoky downtown Portland, and I can almost see the fantastic Northwest Natural building. I take a step over this way, but I would be able to see it. Are you guys trying to get those 11Ws and the Northwest Naturals? Are they even really on the pipeline right now, or are you guys going to be trying to diversify or shift your focus in the coming years of what type of projects you're shooting to build?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I too am sitting downtown right now too. I'm on the 6th floor of a little 6-story quarter block building that we built for the Menashe families. And if you were to go to Jordan or Barry or Lauren today and ask them if they're ready to build, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think they might, be a little bit hesitant, right? And that's the reaction that we're getting from a lot of our, kind of private developer clients. And that goes whether you're, a family-owned business, like the Menashes would be a great example, or the Goodmans, or it could also apply to many of our large, kind of more institutional clients and investors in real estate. So, when I think about this question, it really comes down to let's take it by market type, right? I mean, look at hospitality. Think about the impact that coronavirus just had on that, right? Look at office, like commercial office, and think about the uncertainty there with this new way of working and what we're going to do. Take a look at multifamily and think about that from the standpoint of, is downtown where you want to live right now, right? So when we're talking dense urban development, not to mention the incredible headwinds that many of those multifamily projects faced prior to COVID, right? So rent compressions and, SDCs going up and, just, affordability, all these issues. There's a myriad of
SDCs are those fees that developers have to pay in connection with building, whether they're sewer charges or street connections or things like that.
Sure, and I apologize. Thank you, Jonathan, for clarifying there. The inclusionary zoning is another big piece of that, Jonathan, as you well know. So there were a lot of different headwinds that were kind of pushing against the residential guys. So those 3 markets, hospitality, office, and residential, they're all in a precarious state right now, and that makes things difficult. We have some projects that live in that space that are yet to be capitalized, right? So how willing are different capital partners to provide equity to those jobs to get them off the ground. So that's a major concern right now. And I think there's, I'm very hopeful. My glass half full is that we're going to see, a few things help with that, I guess, calm that uncertainty, which is, we have an election coming up here in November, and that resolution hopefully will help. You know, we're just all praying that we're able to have a vaccine here, you know, sometime either late this year or early next, you know. So when you start to look at some things like that and the certainty that they might bring back, I think that helps those three markets. But to answer your question, that uncertainty in that commercial space has caused us to somewhat pivot in terms of our attention and where we're looking. There's still markets that remain extremely strong. I'm insanely jealous of Mr. Evan Bernstein and our friends that are in the industrial space. We don't do a lot of light industrial, but we do a fair amount of manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing, and that sort of thing. And so we're focused on that. We're focused on data centers, so what we would call mission critical. So creating new data centers for, you know, the Facebooks and the Amazons and that kind of group. We see that continuing to be very strong. And we also think that healthcare remains pretty strong. They got hit pretty hard in you know, the inception of coronavirus, but you know, the public has kind of stepped up, you know, the government has stepped up and helped prop that up. And we see a lot of change needing to happen in response to coronavirus that then causes healthcare to continue to be strong. So I'd say those are kind of our three focus areas right now would be industrial and manufacturing, you know, mission critical data centers, healthcare, and then maybe on the outside of that, depending on where you are in the country and what's getting funded, public works projects and things of that nature.
And just a quick hit, we've got a question, and I welcome people to ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll try to come back to them, but just Eddie, quick hit. Do you have a sense, and maybe it's hard, it's a little inchoate, but of like what you are, the numbers of what you are chasing right now, sort of relative to that $1 billion that you were chasing before COVID, does it seem like the market has shrunk quite a bit? Is it totally dried up for the type of projects that you're chasing? I don't know if you have that kind of number.
I don't have a specific number, I guess, to share on that because it's kind of a moving average, if you will. But it's significantly less than it was in terms of the pace of new opportunities for us. But with that said, there's still, as I was just mentioning, there's still plenty of work there. It's just in your non-private development markets, right? That's kind of where the focus of the work is.
Yeah. So
I've got a question. I've got a question, but it's not through Zoom. It's just, you know, Eddie, when are you going to run for office? You're so eloquent. You're handsome in your suit. You're doing a Zoom call from a sauna, it looks like. You've got my vote, whatever you run for. Eddie LaBerge, you know, I'd be honored to be your running mate or just a fan. But honestly, I could sit here and hear you speak all the time. Not only are you eloquent and sharp and well-liked, you're a nice guy. So it's just fun. I'm having a blast just listening to you. Jonathan, ask me no more questions. It's we lost Ashley. It should just be the Eddie show from now on. All I want to do is listen to you. So interesting. I hope this is fascinating. It's so cool.
I love you too, man. I love you too.
I want to ask sort of a related question though to you, Evan. So, you know, you mentioned that you had a project that you had been working on for about a year, and you were taking that squirrel position. Do we go for not? How are you looking out 6 months, 12 months, a year, you know, a couple years? Are there projects that you are still hoping to move forward with? Are there projects that you're kicking yourself that, you know, you wished you would move forward with?
Great question. Yeah.
What are you bullish? I mean, I remember hearing Jordan Schnitzer talk at a Portland Business Journal event, and this always stuck with me. He said something to the effect of, to be in the real estate development industry, you have to be an optimistic person. Mm-hmm. Right? You have to be looking towards growth in the community, because there's no reason to build unless your community is growing. People are moving there, people are having kids. So you've got to be an optimistic, sort of positive person. So are you optimistic and positive about this community? Are you investing? Are you slowing down investing? Do you wish you had invested more? Where are you guys at on that?
It's a great question. If you think about it, you have to be optimistic. You know, the projects that we build and groups like us build are speculative. So we'll go find a piece of land and purchase the land, design a building or buildings, and hope that you get it right. It's almost like in the field of dreams, build it and they will come. Well, they better, right? So we build these with zero commitment. So you have to be optimistic in that respect. We don't know everything. You try to find locations that are well located and close to rooftops, because our typical tenant size and profile live close to their home, the owners of these companies or managers. So most of our projects are located on major thoroughfares or highways or main roads and things like that. But you take a chance. Right now, my brother-in-law, Brad, walked into the office after being down in Salem this morning. He's running one of our new projects down there. It's our first entry into Salem. And, we're not quite sure about that market. We know it's the second biggest city in Oregon, and obviously it's a capital city, but, that was one of those things that we decided to move forward with, and we're glad we did. We could have easily said, you know what, we're going to pull the plug on that. We'll build it next year or in a couple of years. We'll see how these things shake out. But the reality is they take a while to build, and you don't want to kick yourself and say, I missed it. On that note, though, we did temporarily pause a speculative project in Vancouver earlier in the year, and we're trying to ramp it up and dust it off, and trying to scramble to try to meet timelines and secure tenants who are ready to go. And we're not kicking ourselves. It was the right move, but I kind of wish we had the foresight, or wish we would have maybe taken a chance 5-6 months ago and proceeded as we were going to do it. Because again, I mentioned earlier, sort of forward thinking. We have these projects for a long time, and I don't think ever when we've delayed projects in the past, we've said that was a smart move. It's almost, you almost wish you would have built it. As Eddie knows, construction costs never come down. Sometimes they stabilize, but over the years, they continue to go up and up and up. That's why he's got such a big smile on his face today. But so it's almost one of those things where, and they take time, right? It could take a year, it could take a year and a half, and then you have to lease it up, it takes time. And then you have to, if you're going to finance it, it takes some time. So it's really hard to pinpoint the specifics, but no regrets over what how we kind of handle this, but we feel pretty good about it. Outside of our company, on the industrial development front, projects are continuing to be built and planned and leased up and sold. 2 industrial big box warehouses sold this summer, so in the middle of COVID, and they were at record high values and low cap rates. So that was pretty crazy. One was in Troutdale, one was at the Portland airport on leased land. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it later, but if there are people watching this today saying, is this a great time to be buying right now and investing? Always, however, I don't think there's any great buys right now, right? Pricing's still very, very high. And all the sale prices have justified really high sale prices. So you're not going to go steal a building now, especially in industrial. Nobody's bleeding. And a lot of folks, if you own and operate real estate, if you sell, there's a tax consequence oftentimes. So unless you can go find something else and there's not many opportunities, it may not be the best time to sell right now. So things always shake up and shake out, but it's kind of an interesting time right now.
Well, Eddie, I know that it looked like you wanted to pop in there. I know one of the statistics that you gave at a NAOP event in the last year was that you literally have been tracking, Turner's been tracking construction pricing forever. I mean, like the last 100 years or something like that. You've got an index, and literally things had, as Evan said, had flattened out or gone up, but never had gone down. So for the folks that, come to me, come to other folks and say, hey, we're going to just wait on construction, prices may come down, never really happened. But maybe you've been seeing some pricing flatten out or go down, I gather, in this COVID era for the first time.
Yeah, it's a great, you probably saw me wagging my finger at Evan there. We have a really interesting perspective, having started in 1902, right? I think it was maybe 80 years ago or so is when we really started to track the costs on a national basis. And we create this thing called the Turner Cost Index. And what it does is it tracks the construction costs across the country. It has a bunch of different inputs from all of the different regions, and kind of just showcases that, and you can benchmark off of that matrix. And there's only a couple times in its history where it's gone flat or even depressed right, or de-escalated. And one of those times was the 08-09 crisis, financial crisis. And then just recently, just this second quarter of this year, and I've been meaning to get this out to the Portland community, we saw actually a 1% dip in that cost index. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but we're actually projecting another 1% dip for Q3 of this year. So to give the audience some perspective, you know, if you were to look back the last 2 years or so, we've been tracking at about 1% to 1.5% per quarter. So call it 4 to 6% in escalation of construction costs on an annual basis. So to see this thing essentially, you know, have an inflection point and start to trend down by 1% for the last now 2 quarters is a very significant movement in the market. And so, you know, my last comment there where I was talking about uncertainty and, you know, do all these different developers in town build, you know, they may take a look at it also and say, hey, it's going to take me 2 years, you know, a year to get this thing designed and 2 years to build it. And by that point in time, I'm looking at a totally different market, right? And if I can grab what is going to be comparatively low construction pricing right now, I'm going to go ahead and do it, right? But those are the decisions that, you know, that the Menashes or the Goodmans or, you know, Evan and his group, you know, have to make. They have to kind of do that calculus and figure out what makes sense. And so, you know, that's where
together a deal here. What can we build? What can we start building right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally like to lobby for Jonathan to reduce his billing pricing by about 1% a quarter as well. I think that would make a lot of people happy because
the sound cut out, but I couldn't quite hear you.
You're breaking up.
Okay, so in terms of Evan, you mentioned.
I am back. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm hoping that you can. I lost video and internet altogether. So I'm now on my phone, and unfortunately, I can't get video going. But hopefully, you can at least hear me.
We can hear you, and we appreciate you being here because I definitely would. We were going to you next, and I'd like to loop back to that because you're sort of at the heart of, you know, the deals that are driving the purchases and the development that Evan's doing and the construction that Eddie's doing with your leasing. Mm-hmm. So what were you seeing, Ashley, you know, March, April, in that time period? I'm guessing, as I was saying, maybe you're doing some even sort of quasi pro bono work for some of your clients, helping them try to make deals with Evan to try to keep their businesses going. And then is that what you're seeing today, or are you seeing folks starting to reinvest and sign leases?
Yeah, great, very loaded question. So when stay-at-home order was put into effect, that following week was drastic. We went from really high daily activity to next to nothing. So it was very apparent to us that the uncertainty that was creating in the retail environment was so unprecedented that nobody knew what to do. So I personally had about 14 transactions in progress, and they all, except for 3, hit the pause button. Fast forward another 60, 90 days, and what we saw during that time period was a complete shift in mentality moving forward. So what we believe has happened as a result of COVID is that any of the businesses that were kind of on the fringe of struggling to pay rent or not making ends meet or not adapting to the changing times from online commerce versus experiential commerce, that whole time period of either they were going to figure it out and adapt and be able to sustain and make it, or they were on a path of destruction already, was just accelerated. So to be honest, we haven't seen nearly the tenant fallout that we thought we might see. So the tenants that you're seeing and the headlines that you're seeing in the news about, you know, retail is these mass exoduses of tenants, that's primarily, I'd say, reserved for more of your regional mall, soft goods, clothing stores type of uses versus your neighborhood shopping centers, which is our primary arena. So You know, businesses like clothing stores or Sears and Pier 1s and JCPenney's, those are what you're reading about in reference to retail dying for the large part. But those were already on that path before then.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today, and the businesses that have been able to adapt to new COVID protocols or online ordering or completely revamp their tech side of their business, they have actually found a way to survive, and not only survive, but we're seeing a lot more of interest and expansions once again. So we're right back up to activity level that we were at pre-COVID, which is fantastic. So there has been a little bit of change though. Pre-COVID, if you asked any of us in our office, you know, the uses that we are seeing expand and that we're seeing some continuity with success rates, we would have been able to give you the top 5 to 10 that were strong and operating. Post-COVID, that's become a lot more unpredictable. As I'm sure we're all aware, especially here in the Portland area, we're a very food-centric city here. And we've all read about the famed restaurants that have now decided to close their doors. Well, the other side of that coin is that there's also a lot of restaurants expanding right now. So the last 5 deals that I've done, 3 of them have been in food service, which to me is just really interesting. But it also speaks to the unpredictable nature of the environment that we're in. As far as the types of tenants that we see, the others that are certainly struggling right now are your large fitness stores, which we've all seen in the news headlines as well. And sit-down restaurants are still struggling, particularly if they don't have the ability to have outdoor seating, which the city has done, I think, a great job of kind of overflowing into the streets and closing streets so that restaurants can accommodate a higher seating capacity, at least for the summer months. We'll see what fall brings.
Fire certainly did not.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's just yet again another damper on everything.
We've got
just to give you an idea
left, and let me
go ahead.
Let's move to some sort of quick hits. And Ashley, I think maybe I'll do the first one with you. Portland is known for its restaurant scene, its food scene. You know, we would go to Eddie's building to get some Blue Star donuts. They're not there anymore. I would go and eat at any number of great restaurants, some of which are closing. In maybe like 20 or 30 seconds, can our food scene survive in Portland, survive COVID?
Short answer to that is yes. And again, it's kind of the speeding up process of adaptation. So the operators that are able to kind of broaden their horizons as far as the type of offering and not just be a sit down or not just be a takeout, for example, I think are the ones that are actually finding success and able to wrap their minds around being sustainable and look at expanding even. So for example, I've got a restaurant right now that we are working through permits for a build out. It's a 3,700 square foot restaurant. It's a combination of sit down, and then what they've done is taken their footprint and a portion of it, they've got another entrance to it. And what they plan to do is from that side have kind of quote unquote more of a cafe offering where you walk in and there's a counter service where you can purchase pre-made meals, sandwiches, to-go type of items. So it's just walk in, grab and go kind of thing. Or you can go in the other door and actually have a full service dining experience post-COVID, when things open fully back up again. So that kind of creativity that we're starting to see from our tenants is really fun to see. And I think that that's what we're going to continue to see down the line.
Great. Quick one for you, Eddie. And this one comes also from one of the people watching. So appreciate those questions. How has it been to work with the city, the county? How is that changing in terms of getting through the development and construction process And are they, I know through your work at NAOP, you've just met with the mayor of Portland earlier today. You're constantly meeting with public officials in Portland, Washington, D.C. Are they listening to the folks that are having difficulty developing? I know in the Jewish community just across the street from us, one of the synagogues hoping to expand, and SDCs and things like that were just killing them. So are there municipalities that are listening and trying to work with you to help that process move forward?
Yeah, boy. I mean, yeah, and that's a loaded question for sure. Yeah, but it's also a very great question, right? Because it's insanely important, and I think one of the things that we all have to remember when we talk about investment, and we've all been kind of talking about some of the local families or development firms that we all know and are familiar with. But we also have to remember there's a massive trend happening right now, right? Which is that a lot of, we're Portland, we're the most affordable major metro on the West Coast. And we're seeing this influx of people and companies and capital to Portland because of that, right? We're sandwiched in between Seattle and San Francisco. But it's also important for people to remember that that capital is fungible, right? And those companies don't necessarily have to come here. And we're relying on our elected officials and our local government to make sure that the climate here in Portland is attractive to that money, to that investment, right? And to those companies. And so one of the things that is frankly just, frustrating is, the amount of time that it can take to get through the entitlement process, right? One of the things that we spoke with the mayor about today on our call with him was their recent vote, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, to send the Hyatt job in the Pearl back through design review, even though it had approval from, from every authority having jurisdiction over the project. And, when you add time to those projects, it costs money and it's significant. And the folks that are thinking about moving here and the folks that are thinking about investing here and relocating here, they see that and they have other options, Salt Lake City, Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho, some of these other cities that are attractive and maybe have an easier path towards success for them. So it's a very good question. It's something that we continue, to struggle with, but I also, I take them at their word that they're trying to improve and get better. And we hope that we can continue to, have productive conversations with them and make it an attractive place for people to come and work and invest.
All right, Evan, sort of related question, and if you can get in, I know that we're really short on time here, but you've developed in different cities around town. Now you're moving down to Salem. Is the experience in Salem any different than it is in Portland or some of the cities around here in terms of responsiveness, willingness to work with a developer to get something built?
Yeah, Salem's been fantastic. Every municipality has their stars. It's fluid, it changes. You may have a city that historically was fast and responsive and open for business, and then someone retires and a new person comes in and it's a challenge. But we don't do too much in the city of Portland. Most of our projects are in the burbs. I drove through sort of ground zero of the CBD yesterday, and I came home and I told my wife that I was sad. I hadn't seen it. I think 10% of people are working in the central business district right now. So we're fortunate we count our lucky stars that we're in the burbs for the most part. But I tell you what, even trying to get a permit in the city of Tigard, it used to be 1 day or 1 week, and now it's 8 weeks because people are working remotely. The stacks are high. As we've talked about before, it's still really, really busy. And look, I'm not a believer of working from home being a sustainable program long-term. If you're in the tech world, okay. If you're a commissioned salesperson, okay. If you're a salaried employee, we got to find a way to get back to work because, I took a poll at the beginning of the pandemic. This is kind of interesting. I polled 50 people, 50, who could be honest with me. And I asked them, what's your productivity and what's your effort level during COVID? And you'll never believe it. The productivity was about 52% on average, and the effort level was about 69% on average. So you tell me, all the employers watching this today, is that acceptable to you? Is that going to work? So we've got challenges, and I'm not saying everybody's slacking at home. You've got issues. You've got children and you're trying to homeschool, and parent and work, and you've got pets and maybe a spotty internet connection, you know, a lot of people have wonderful homes and nice spaces to work from. A lot of people don't. They're working in an apartment that doesn't have air conditioning or thin walls or something. So I want to try to be safe and get everybody to commit, wear masks. Let's get through this thing, but we need to get back to work because that's a delay in itself in trying to get things done just from a time standpoint. So I think everybody's doing their best. They're working hard. We're all in it together. We're trying to make it happen. But I mean, there's challenges, and then you throw forest fires and smoke on top of that, and riots and everything else, and it's never ending. We did a deal yesterday. We did a deal in one day. A guy lost his home in the Colton forest fires. He was worried about losing his warehouse in the same area. In one day, we worked overnight. We got him into our building in Clackamas, and we're really proud of that. But it's just, you never know what's going to hit you right now. It is a crazy time.
Well, I'd love to talk with all three of you for another like 2 or 3 or 4 hours to get through this. Unfortunately, we have hit our 75-minute mark. So I just want to say how appreciative I am to be able to have Ashley Ray, to have Eddie LaBerge, to have Evan Bernstein, to have Ashley make it back onto the Zoom, and to have all of you here. We had like 50 or 60 people here. I hope you all got falafel, because I mean, Alan's falafel is outstanding. If you
Unbelievable.
Get it today, get it another day. He's in the parking lot there. And we just really appreciate your supporting the JCC. It's a great organization. I've been, every moment of my life since like daycare all the way through going to events there now, and throughout my life, it's meant a lot to me, and it means a lot to me that all of you are here. So I don't know, Steve or Lenny or Saul, if you have any other parting wisdom. I'll let you jump in. Otherwise, I will say goodbye for everyone. So thank you all for coming. And if you have any more questions, feel free to shoot them to me. I can pass them on to the group or try to answer them as best I can. But thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it, guys.
So,
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I'll wrap. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Evan and Eddie and Ashley. We really want to thank our sponsors, Portland State University, Rich Barker, Wealth Management Advisor of Merrill Lynch, Barry and Carla Benson, First Republic Bank, Gewurz Menashe, Jonathan of Barg Singer PC, the Jerry and Helen Stern Grandchildren's Fund of OJCF, and Turner Construction. So the third Thursday of every month, usually at noon, obviously not this time, but usually at noon, we're going to have our panels. In October, we're going to do How to Be Anti-Racist. That is Thursday, October 15th, featuring Karen Haberman, who's a white ally and anti-racist that worked for the SNCC in 1963 Atlanta. Barbara O'Hare, a Black social activist working to undo racism for the last 25 years. And that will be moderated by Rabbi Benjamin Barnett from Chavurah Shalom. And our November panel information is the business of marijuana with Jeff Mazur, who's the CFO at Wild, which is a CBD company, and Jeff Sugarman, Chief Compliance Officer with Groundworks, who also helped write the first medical marijuana law here in Oregon. So that'll be November 19th at noon. And Shana Tova, thank you all for being on. I'd like to thank the panel. This was great, and happy, healthy, and smoke-free New Year for all of us.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Thank you so much.
You too.